Good morning, everyone. Really good to see you. It is just before 7 o'clock here on the East Coast, and I am Anne-Marie Green. Boy, do we have a lot of news today. We're going to start in New York. New York prosecutors have indicted the Trump Organization. Sources confirmed to CBS News. In addition, Chief Financial Officer Allen Weisselberg is expected to be arraigned today. The charges are still under seal, but they will likely hone in on tax-related offenses. Former President Donald Trump himself is not expected to be charged. Sources say Trump Organization attorneys plan to move to dismiss the case. So now I want to bring in Laura Podesta. Laura, you are in New York. You're right outside of the Manhattan DA's office, and you have some breaking news for us.
That's right. Good morning, Anne-Marie. Mr. Weisselberg walked into the DA's office right behind me here around 6:20 this morning. He'll appear in court later today. After divorces, bankruptcies, and impeachments, this is the latest legal trouble for the Trump name. But as you mentioned, Mr. Trump himself is not charged, though that could potentially change. Former President Trump's company and his longtime chief financial officer, Allen Weisselberg, have been indicted for alleged tax-related crimes. The charges, set to be unsealed later today, are expected to focus on whether the company gave perks to top executives without reporting them properly. That could possibly include the use of apartments, cars, and school tuition, according to people familiar with the case. Weisselberg's estranged former daughter-in-law was a key part of the takedown. She turned over several boxes of documents to prosecutors. In 2019, Michael Cohen, Mr. Trump's former personal attorney, testified that Weisselberg never acted alone.
Everything was done with the knowledge and at the direction of Mr. Trump.
The criminal charges stem from a 2-year investigation led by Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr. A lawyer for Mr. Trump told CBS News he does not foresee the former president being charged himself, but that does not mean Mr. Trump is in the clear.
This indictment, anyway, looks to me like the culmination of a pressure campaign against Allen Weisselberg. However, the grand jury is sitting until November.
In a statement, former President Trump said his company's actions were standard practice and in no way a crime. The charges unsealed today could be the first of many. It's likely that prosecutors will try to get Mr. Weisselberg to cooperate with their broader investigation, which also includes bank and insurance fraud allegedly committed by the Trump Organization. Anne-Marie.
All right, Laura Podesta in New York. Laura, thank you very much. So for more on this, let us bring in Nicole Sganga. She is in Washington. Let's dig into what we can expect here today. And that's actually my first question, Nicole. Just what will happen today in court?
Well, hi, Anne-Marie. Good to be with you. And the Trump Organization, as you just heard, has been indicted by a grand jury in Manhattan for alleged tax-related crimes. Sources familiar with the investigation tell CBS News. And as you heard from Laura just moments ago, our CBS affiliate cameras captured Allen Weisselberg. He is the chief financial officer for the Trump Organization and a close, longtime confidant of the Trump family. They captured him surrendering to the district attorney's office this morning. And this is really historic. It is the first time that we're expected to see criminal charges against the former president's namesake company, his real estate empire, since prosecutors first started really digging into this about 3 years ago. And while we know that the indictment, as of this conversation, is still under seal, we expect we'll know specific charges just before today's arraignment, the initial hearing, later today before a state court judge. But what we do know is that the grand jury indictment is the result of a longtime investigation led by Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance. It's focused on whether Mr. Weisselberg and other top executives at the Trump Organization avoided paying taxes on some of the perks and benefits that they received, things like company cars, apartment leases, and yes, even private school tuition for Mr. Weisselberg's own grandchildren.
So, as he mentioned, Donald Trump himself is not expected to be charged today, but the grand jury is sitting until November. So could this mean that there may be several more indictments to come? Could some of them concern the former president?
Yeah, well, there are still two very open investigations right now, one led by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and one by the New York State Attorney General. Now, right now, we are told that defense lawyers, folks I've spoken to, are not expecting the former president to be charged, and legal experts I speak with tell me that, if it even does happen, that's a ways away. But any charges against the Trump organization, we should point out, and Weisselberg would, of course, hurt former President Donald Trump, who has fought off several criminal and civil probes, both during his time at the White House and now thereafter. If the Trump organization is charged, the company could face some tough business consequences as a result, and certainly the environment for the Trump organization could get significantly worse if we see a conviction here. Now, for his part, Mr. Trump has denied all wrongdoing. He said investigations are politically charged in a statement put out on Monday. He said this case is comprised of, quote, things that are standard practice throughout the U.S. business community and in no way a crime. One thing is for certain, Anne Marie, even if, the former president is never charged, we do not expect him to sit quietly on the sidelines here.
Well, yeah, he has not already. So in regards to Allen Weisselberg, the CFO of the Trump organization, so we don't know what he's being charged with. There's speculation that it has something to do with, taxes and receiving compensation that he did not file as compensation, like, tuition for his grandkids' school or something along those lines. So I guess it's difficult to determine what sort of punishment he may be facing because we really don't know what the charges are. But can you talk about the significance of Allen Weisselberg being at this point the only individual that is facing any charges? It's the company and then it's Weisselberg.
Yeah, and, we could see more charges to come, certainly implicating other, Trump organization high-level executives. And you're right, we're a long way off from sentencing. This is a very unusual case. Many legal experts and tax attorneys, who work in New York State have pointed out to CBS News tax evasion on perks and benefits for, a large organization like that. That's curious. So broadly speaking, though, legal experts and tax attorneys do tell CBS News that with no criminal record, this is really looking more like a fine and probation for Mr. Weisselberg. Again, it's early. If convicted of a low-level tax crime, someone like Mr. Weisselberg could face a minimum of 1 year in jail. What we will likely see, moving forward is prosecutors threatening potential jail time in an effort to gain Weisselberg's cooperation in the overall investigation here. We mentioned earlier there are still two ongoing investigations, probing the Trump organization and a wide array of its business dealings. So prosecutors here have really been aiming to try to get Weisselberg to cooperate. He's been at the Trump organization for decades, a close confidant of the former president. And so, that's really the strategy here. Prosecutors will begin handing over their evidence to the defense after the indictment is returned. So that'll likely enable Mr. Weisselberg and his team, his legal team, to assess the strength of the case against him and make those decisions moving forward, with time.
So we also saw in Laura's story that Weisselberg's former daughter-in-law was instrumental in the investigation. Do we know any more about her role?
Yeah, it's a name we've heard a lot. Jennifer Weisselberg, the former daughter-in-law of Allen Weisselberg. She said she's prepared to testify against him at trial. Her lawyer has publicly stated she'll do whatever she can to help. Now, at this point, we don't know whether or not Jennifer Weisselberg has been asked to testify. We do know that she has been cooperating as a witness in the district attorney's investigation, as well as a parallel investigation I mentioned earlier by the New York State Attorney General. She sat for interviews with prosecutors. She's offered up boxes and boxes of documents related to the Trump organization that she obtained through her divorce from her husband, Barry Weisselman. Earlier this year, the Manhattan DA's office subpoenaed school tuition payments for Allen Weisselberg and Jennifer Weisselberg's children, Allen Weisselberg's grandchildren. And, Jennifer Weisselberg publicly said that between 2012 and 2019, more than $500,000 $100,000 of her children's tuition was paid for in checks either signed by Allen Weisselberg or former President Donald Trump. So the DA is likely examining whether or not the Weisselberg's tuition payment setup sort of qualifies for tax evasions. And again, you know, prosecutors often put pressure on a suspect's family to try to gain cooperation. In this case, they're trying to gain that cooperation from Allen Weisselberg. That's been a primary objective of the Manhattan District Attorney. You know, Mr. Weisselberg has not cooperated so far, but we'll see if that changes in the coming days, weeks, even months.
Nicole, really fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.